All right, good day, and welcome to week 3 in Capstone 805. Today I'm going to go through basically the submission requirements for project phase 1, the project proposal. And in addition to going through some examples for use case diagrams, activity diagrams, and wireframes, and showing you some tools that you can use in order to make that more efficient. And to set the expectations. We might also dive quickly into the content for next week, which will include project management tools and getting to using project management tools, etc. If we get time. So we're going to start off with looking at the actual document for project phase 1. Let me bring that up. Okay. So here we are, project phase 1, project proposal. So this is due at the end of week 3. And the idea is this is a group submission. And this follows on and follows up from the previous submissions, which would have included requirements gathering, questionnaires, site navigation diagrams, etc. Just to try and really get an idea of the scope of your project and all that your project will encompass. So this week's task will continue that process and result in a formal proposal that you're going to submit. Now, we are going to avoid a few parts of what a normal proposal would have in it, such as cost analysis and feasibility study, but be aware that those things are normally there, but we are going to skip them for this particular project for the consequences of the time that it would take, and that we just don't have time to do everything in the course. So, but be aware that they would normally be there. So the idea here is this is the project proposal. You're going to accumulate everything what you've done so far. So far you've done a system request with problem statement, solution statement, etc. You did a questionnaire, questions and answers. You did a very detailed requirements listing, which you've already been given feedback for. You've also done a navigation diagram or a site workflow diagram. And you're going to bring all of those into one formal document in addition to use case scenarios, use case documents, activity diagrams, and wireframe mockups. So it is quite a bit of work again this week. But by the time you're done this week, you really have a solid handle on your project, everything that's involved. You've got a lot of the design concepts completed at this point, and now we can start working on, okay, let's get into technical design and then moving into actually implementing that project through the software development lifecycle. So, looking at this week's tasks, again, use cases and activity diagrams. So, what's going to happen is there is a number of diagrams you'll have to do. So, and it is based on the number of people in your group. Now, realistically, I should say that the number you need to do is all of them. However, because of the amount of work that may take, we're going to say, let's cover the 4 biggest ones, and 4 being the most important ones. And that is based on you having a group of 4. If you have a group of 5, you need to do 5. So it is basically 1 per person. And I do want each individual person's names on the diagram to do. It is a group submission, but I want the name of the individual who worked on that use case and that activity diagram. Now, that being said, before we continue, please understand also that use cases and activity diagrams go together. So they will be the same scenario. All right, there we go. So one of the things, again, what I just said, repeating, is that a use case scenario and an activity diagram go together such that they will be on the same topic or the same area of the site. Now, once each person has completed a use case scenario and activity diagrams, you should get together as a group, review each other's diagrams, provide feedback, and most importantly, make them consistent. So even though 4 different people will be doing them, they should look as if they were done by one person. They should have the same color schemas, the same fonts, the same style, same sizing, scaling, those kind of things, okay? So just ensuring that you have consistency throughout your project. Nothing looks worse than having 4 diagrams that look like 4 different projects, okay? So be a little bit of professionalism, okay? After that, you're then going to create a screen list, which is nothing more than a bulleted list of screens. Maybe categorize the bulleted list of screens by public screens, by user authenticated screens, so screens that you can only see if you've been logged in, or screens that are administrative screens. Then you're going to create some wireframe mockups. Now in this scenario, there's not a set number of mockups. Again, this will be all of them. And what I mean by that is, if there are 3 pages that literally have identical layouts, you only need 1 wireframe mockup for those 3 screens. Okay? But for every screen that is slightly different, you need to do a new wireframe mockup. And any screen that is a form, so as in text boxes people type in, they have a submit button, those kind of things, there must be a wireframe for each of the screens with forms on them, okay? And that is why we start off with the list of screens. So you sort of know, okay, what are all the screens? Then you can categorize them that, okay, the About Us page and the About Us page and the company information page and the privacy policy page and the terms and condition page will likely all have very similar layouts. So 1 wireframe mockup will work for that. I do suggest with the wireframe mockups that you make 1 really good first, because you want to have a similar template, like your header, your footer, your layout, your basic layout and all that should be consistent throughout your website. So make 1 mockup and sort of design the layout and what's the template of the website going to look like. Now, once you've got that one perfect, you can just copy the file, rename it, make the changes necessary, and move forward. It will save you a bunch of time. Spend the time to get that template right first, because let's say you make 20 wireframe mockups, and then you say, oh, I think we should move the logo from the left to the right. And you're like, oh boy, now you got to edit 20 diagrams. Okay? So come up with a good template first, and then build. It will save you a significant amount of time. Spend the extra time at the start to make a template that everybody's happy with. Now go ahead and make the individual drawings. Okay? Moving forward. All right. And your submission is going to be a single Word document. Okay? Please do not PDF the document. Submit it as a Word document. Okay? Cover page, table of contents, introduction, page numbering, so a professional report, okay? You're going to update your system request. You're going to give a quick write-up on your project tool. Actually, you're not going to do this. I should remove this from the project because that's the next topic. So nothing on the project management tool, so you can ignore that requirement, okay? A URL link to your private group source, so you should create a GitHub repository, and you're going to use that GitHub account next week in next week's submission, which is the project management tool, okay? And making sure that, but I want you to set up Git source control now so that you can use it to start collecting your documentation and collaborating with your teammates. Also making sure that you've added your professor as a collaborator in that GitHub repository, all right? You're going to include the use case scenario, activity diagrams, and the wireframe. As far as the questions and the requirements go, the questionnaire, the requirements, they should also still be included, but you can either include them in the main body of the document, or because of the length and the technical nature of them, I'm okay if you include them as an appendix at the end. So either or, they need to be in the document, but you can include them as an appendix if that feels appropriate for that particular topic, okay? Spelling and grammar will matter, okay? Consistency in the look and feel, so you're making many diagrams with 4 or 5 different people, making sure that they all are consistent in their look, their feel, and their professionalism, okay? Those kind of things, all right? Teams has been giving us an issue today. I mean, I don't know if at the time of the recording if it's been fixed, but hopefully then we can use Teams to also share files, collaborate, hold meetings, and those for now as well. Okay? All right, let's get into some examples here. So inside of Blackboard, if I go to content here, okay, I've provided a bunch of sample files. Okay, and so these sample files can be used as a guideline of sort of what expectations are. All right, so I'm going to start off with an activity diagram. I think activity diagrams are a good place to start to sort of get the lay of it. Then I'm going to go to use case diagrams. Okay, you can do those in either order, whatever works for you. You do you. Okay. My brain works in diagram format, so I like to do the diagram first. The use case scenario is more writing it out. So if you have a diagram and then you write it out in English, explaining what the process is, but in words rather than a diagram, I find I see things, I see where I missed, and I say, well, what about that? And what about this? And what about that? And so I find that works bad. If I'm writing it out in words first, it's really hard for me to visualize, but you might be the kind of person where writing it in words first might work for you. So again, you do you. I will do activity diagrams first. So the sample I have here, let me see if I've got it viewable here. Ooh, there's the messy one. Okay, there's the messy one. I do have a cleaner one. Let me see if I can find the cleaner one here quickly. I have some sample demos from other days. Okay, I'm going to actually go into my hard drive here and see if I can find it, and I'll be right back. All right, I had found it. I actually do have it posted here on the site. I just didn't see it right away. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and look at this. So there's two activity diagrams. This one here, which is the messier one, is very detailed and has all the information in it. I had created this one live in class once, and so I didn't get time during class to organize it in a way that it was clean. So there are some lines crossing each other. It's a little messy, but the details on the data is there. Okay, but let's go look at a little cleaner one that I had produced at another time. Okay, and that's this one here. So this is an activity diagram. Let's go ahead and go full screen with that. No, let's zoom in so we can see this a little better. Okay, so this is an activity diagram which is basically has the same information in it, but it's more official and it's cleaner. So you can see by the detail here, the amount of detail that we're looking at every little decision, every little side process that can happen. Basically, you should be able to take an activity diagram and almost go straight to pseudocode, where you're understanding, okay, what are the logic decisions that need to be made? And by the way this works, you can also think about object-oriented programming, that each one of these boxes could be a separate method, or could require multiple methods, or a decision process, or a small algorithm. So these diagrams are very helpful for obtaining or getting the information that you require in order to move forward straight into past logic and design and straight into code. And with the logic already decided, it does make coding a lot easier, because then you're only concentrated on the syntax efficiency and the actual architecture of the software, and not necessarily on business decisions that need to be made. Let's make those now so we don't need to make them later. Okay. Following this, this is an official UML activity diagram. So we have the black circle for the start. This would then accumulate as we're starting on the login page. All right. The symbology I have used for this is a square represents an object, a page within the system. A rounded corner rectangle represents a process or an action. And a diamond is a decision. There are some other symbols for forking and consolidation and those kind of things, but most of the time these three symbols will pretty much cut it. But sometimes you do need forking. Okay, parallel paths. The other symbol here is the black circle with the line around it, and that is representing an exit point to the activity diagram. You're moving on to some other process now. Okay, so looking at this very quickly, we go to the login page, and from the login page, there's several places you can go. You can click straight on the I forgot my password. You can click straight on the registration page. Okay, the registration page is likely an exit point for the login system because you're going to go off and you're going to register. Right? And the registration form will be a different diagram. Okay? Once you're done the registration diagram, you will come back to the login page, but you will start back on the login page, back up at the top, at the start up here. Okay? So it's likely that that is an exit point for the login page. Same thing with the I forgot my password. I don't have an exit drawn here, but I probably should, because when you're going to forget your password, that's a different process again, a different activity diagram. You got to think, okay, how am I going to recover the password? Am I going to send them an email? Is there two-factor authentication? Are they going to answer some questions about their mother's maiden name and stuff like that in order to recover or change the password? What is that process? That is a separate process, separate diagram. So that again would probably be an exit point because you could not complete login if you forgot your password. Okay, so that could be there. The only other thing, the arrows are demonstrating the directional flow of the process. So the only other exiting process from the login page is your attempt to log in, which essentially is they've hit the login button. Okay. Well, they're sitting there with their name, putting in their username and password. That's not part of the process. Like, that's just on the login page. The process really starts with the first action being they attempt to log in, which is actually clicking the submit button. So the first thing it does, they click on the submit button. Okay. Then we have some client-side JavaScript, which will validate the input form. The first thing it looks at is the login box empty? Well, display a message that the login is required, and then go back to the login page. If the password is empty, display a message that the password is required, and go back to the login page. If both the login and password have been entered, okay, then we can go past the client-side system. Now we're processing the form now on the server side. We probably need to do the same data validation checks on the server side as well. I don't have that in here, so it could be a couple of extra steps. But for now, what I do is I go ahead and go, okay, so we've got a login, we've got a password. First thing we do is we check, does the login exist? We're going to have to connect to a database, do a little SQL command to see, okay, does this login exist in the system? If the login does not exist, we can display a message, and you can either choose, I mean, this is the business decision. You can either choose to go back to the login page and let them try a different login, or just say, okay, that user hasn't been registered, so go to the registration page. So in systems where your login would be an email address, it is likely that they didn't just type in the wrong one. It's that they haven't registered yet, so go to the registration page. In systems where the username is a custom typed in username, then it could be they just did a typo, they did something, so you may want to go to the login page. So that's a business decision. You guys decide. You do you. Okay? If the login does exist, so we do our little SQL command and we get a row back. All right, that means they exist. We can also then go ahead and compare the password. We should probably mention that this password will probably be stored in a secure hashed method, and this would be a hash comparison. It doesn't need to say that in the diagram here, but eventually that will be the case. So, does the password match? If it does not match, we display a message saying the login failed. Okay, we don't say incorrect password because then we're giving it away that the user exists. Okay, you gotta be careful what you give away because hackers can use every little piece of information. So, but we just display the login failed, and we check, has it been 5 or more attempts that have failed in a row? If there has been yes 5 attempts, we basically lock the system account, okay, and that's the end of the process. Like, that's it. The process ends. And unlocking the account would actually end up being a different process, okay? But if they failed the password 5 times in a row, we're locking their account and they can't log back in again for 30 minutes or an hour, or maybe they need to manually reset it, like whatever the case may be, whatever your business rules are. But that's for another diagram. The login screen does know it needs to lock it if they failed 5 times in a row. If that's not 5 times in a row, it then goes all the way back up to the login page and says try again. Okay. If the password matches, now we've got an authenticated user. But what kind of authenticated user? Maybe the members and the administrators use the same login page. So we need to determine, is the user who just logged in an administrator? If they are an administrator, we will redirect that user to an administrative dashboard, and then that ends this process. Like, we're on the administrative dashboard, now we're an administrator, we do admin things, okay? If we're not an administrator, then we just go to the normal user or member dashboard, and again, that's the end of this process. The login has been completed, okay? There may also be something in there like set up OAuth tokens or set up cookies on the machine so that authentication can happen across multiple pages easily. But for the most part right now, we don't need to get that technical, all right? So more business level decision making, okay? There's an example of a login page. So it's a lot of detail for something as simple as logging into a system. Okay, you think logging into a system, you enter a login password and you hit submit. You either go in or you don't, right? But there's a lot more to it than that. Because there's business decisions. Is there a password policy? Is there what kind of messages are we going to display to avoid hacking but being informative? What kind of lockout policy are we going to have if they fail too many times in a row? Right? What's the password recovery process? Like, all these things are questions that you need to decide before you start coding. Like, how do you want your system to run? Okay? So that's your basic activity diagram. So as you can tell, it is pretty straightforward once you understand the level of detail that is expected. Okay? So the level of detail is sort of a balance between not being so technical that you might as well be writing the code, but being detailed enough that each major consideration is displayed in the diagram. Okay? So that's activity diagrams. As I said, use case scenarios will go along with activity diagrams. So let's go look at one of those samples here. So we have a use case diagram. Now, use case diagrams are two kinds of diagrams that you'll see out in the world. The first one is an actual little diagram. I find for the most part the diagrams in the use case scenarios are sort of useless. Like, they're basically either they're very obvious or they're just stick people on a page with some arrows. And it's like, what is that? Like, it's nothing I can't say in words in 2 or 3 sentences, so why bother having a stick figure diagram for it, okay? So I'm not a fan of use case diagrams. So what I prefer are use case specifications. So it's a word written explanation. So between the activity diagram, which is a physical flowchart diagram, and written words in the use case specification, a person who's developing the site, who's actually going to be coding the site, should have all the information they need to start coding. They have all the decisions that are made in the activity diagram, and then they have that described in words in the use case scenario. So between the two of them, there shouldn't be many questions. They should be able to just go ahead and get it done. All right? They can concentrate on syntax and coding and not business decisions. How do you want it to work? Not, this is how it works, just code it. So this is how it works, just code it is very different than, okay, how's this going to work? Are we going to code it this way? Are we going to do it this way? Like, what do you want to do if the person does this? Like, those decisions are made now, not when you're writing code, okay? You separate code. So junior programmers can go in and code and do what they're told and not make decisions. All right, junior developers don't make decisions. They may make suggestions to intermediate and seniors, but they don't actually make the decision. Okay, It is a hierarchy of experience that you gain over time. And when you have zero experience, you may talk to and suggest and learn, and maybe you have a great idea, sure, but it's not your decision regardless. Okay, so that's sort of the idea. These use case diagrams, basically, let me zoom in a bit here. Okay, there's several different versions out there. You can Google, you'll see there's many different templates that you can use. I'm providing you with one of these templates. This is a common one that I've seen. This was obtained from the systems analysis book that is part of the normal systems development books that are used in almost all academic institutions. So it is a fairly standard one. The idea here is you just give use case scenario a name. The example I've got here is the system login. So we are doing the system login again here. A description is just literally brief, to the point, clear and concise. What is this use case scenario? The user is going to log into the system from an anonymous state. So nobody's logged in. Somebody's going to log in now or register if required. Okay, that's sort of the scenario that we're at here. So then what's going to happen is, who are the actors? Who's involved with this? So we have the actor being the system themselves. In modern software, the system is actually a participant in the actions and will make decisions. So they're part of it now, all right? 20 years ago, I mean, it was an if statement, do this, if do this. Now there's a lot more detail and stuff to it, especially when you're getting into generative AI, etc. We're not quite at generative AI yet in our skill level here in the courses, but we start to think that way because we will be very soon, okay? Pretty soon you'll be a chatbot will come up and say, hey, log into my account, and they'll recognize your voice and they'll see your facial recognition. And like, okay, there's your account. And then you're like, hi, Clint, what would you like to do today? And then you tell it what you want to do. Like, we've seen it in movies. We know it's coming. Movies are always the creative outlet to drive technological advances. People dream it up in movies, and then people actually try and make it. Like, and that's the way the world makes. We're not quite at Star Trek yet. All right, no teleporters, right? No Mach or Warp 10, but a lot of our stuff has come from movies like Star Trek and Star Wars and these kind of things. All right. We talk about the actors. So in this case, the actors are the system and the person trying to log in. There's assumptions, constraints, and preconditions. Now, sometimes these are sort of gray and which one is which and where should I put this. So let me try and clarify that for you a little bit. Assumptions are things that you are assuming are true. They're not necessarily fact. They don't need to be there, but you're assuming it. Normally the difference between reality and the assumption, almost all the time with respect to software, is about security. We're assuming people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. All right? Obviously that's not always the case, so we have to build security and protection and all those things. But for the use case scenario about how the system's supposed to be used, we are making some assumptions. So in fact, in this case, as a login system, we will assume the entity attempting to log in is in fact a real person. We all have heard things, especially over COVID with computer prices and that, how bots were logging into websites and buying up all the equipment in advance and all that kind of stuff. We're going to assume that's not going to happen in our system. Bad assumption maybe, but that's for the use case scenario, because we're programming the use case scenario. To protect against this assumption would be another topic. That would be security, protection, authentication, all those kind of things. Okay? Another assumption that we're making. In today's society, 2024 is the current year, everybody has an email address. But does your grandmother? Right? Not everybody has an email address, right? So we're assuming if they're trying to log into our system and use our website, we're assuming they have an email address, okay? So that's another assumption. It may not be true, but we're assuming it is for the purposes of our client base, okay? Then we have preconditions. So preconditions are things that must be there, okay? Without the preconditions, this use case scenario cannot move forward. It doesn't happen. Okay? So we have a couple of preconditions in this case. The first one being that the user is not currently logged in. You can't go to the login page if you're already logged in. So we're going to have a precondition that you can only log into the system if nobody is logged in. Okay? So in that case, they'd have to hit the logout button. Now we can start the use case scenario. Okay? And we can also say, now this one seems sort of funny. It's that the user may or may not already be registered for the system. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Is that not 100% of people? Isn't everybody either registered or not registered? Doesn't that cover everybody? Yes, it does. But you still want to state it, because being either registered or not registered absolutely impacts this scenario. Because if you're not registered, you can't log in. But we don't want to just say, you're not registered, you can't log in, goodbye. Right? We want to say, okay, if you're not registered, sure, you can't log in, but we're going to exit you gracefully by sending you to the registration page. Say, hey, you're new here. Welcome. Please give us some information and we will register you. Now you can come back and log in now. All right? So even though it's not specifically about the login, it needs to be dealt with during the login. Okay? Because if the person tries to log in and says, hey, you don't have an account because the email address doesn't exist, then, hey, we see this is your first time here. Let's get you registered. Okay? And then move forward that way. So, those are the basics. This is just the setup. What are the conditions? What are the assumptions? Who's involved? What constraints do we place on this? Okay? And those are things that we set up before we actually start the scenario. So when we're at the start button of the activity diagram, this is what we know to be true at the start button. And based on moving through the activity diagram, we know this already has happened, so we can make the decisions based on how we've entered the system. Okay? Then what we have is the basic flow. This is literally nothing more than a back and forth who does what when in the logical process. So if I was to take what's written here and compare it to the user diagram, now I did these two separately so they don't match exactly, but idealistically, this basic flow would simply be an English version of the activity diagram, understanding the user action, the system user. So if you had 3 actors, you would have 3 columns here. And you're just going to say, what is the flow? And you're going to put who's doing what under the right column. But you'll do all kinds of things like skipping lines because there's actions over here on the right. And this action doesn't start until like 3 actions over here continue, right? So you sort of make it a hierarchy top to bottom in the order that these actions can happen. But you'll move sideways based on which actor is performing that action. All right, so it's pretty straightforward. It's just an English version of the activity diagram. So use case scenarios, in my opinion, don't need to be some fancy separate diagram. What they need to do is combine with activity diagrams to make a complete, followable description of what the business processes are, such that a developer does not need to ask any questions. Okay? They have all the information they need. Okay? And that's it. That's the activity diagrams and use case scenarios. Now, one limitation on your assignment, because I have provided you with these login examples, for the 1 diagram per person rule, none of you may choose the login. Now, you should, as a group, do the login, because you're all going to have a login system. You can start with mine and modify it for your specific system, but for the 1 per person quota that I've stated, the login one does not count. You need a new one for each person. Okay? Hopefully that's clear. The next thing is the wireframe diagrams. Now, do I have an example here? I don't think I have an example here, but I can show you right now, okay? If you go to draw.io, okay, draw.io. Okay, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new diagram just so I get the template come up. I believe if I go to wireframes, you see here under wireframes, there's some wireframe examples here. Now, you can choose any of these, whatever floats your boat. You do you. What is your site? What is your application? You choose the one that's appropriate for what you guys are doing. But I find for most generic type websites that this one right here is the one that you're going to follow. So we're going to go ahead and create this one. It's going to ask me to save some files, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to go winter 2024 wireframe demo. Okay, going to go ahead, and there we go. We get a wireframe. I don't need any more or less than this. Like, the template is actually a pretty good wireframe diagram, all right? So what I have suggested before is, as a group, decide on a main template for your wireframes. So this one happens to have a header up here, okay? So it has a header up here, has a line. It says, okay, we're going to put the logo here. Maybe your logo's square. Well, then make it square. Like, just, there you go. It's close up. There's my logo, okay? In the top corner up here, you've got some links up here. Maybe this one is going to be your login/logout. Okay, that doesn't quite fit, so let's just move that over. This is going to be do shopping cart, so we'll give it a cart. Maybe you're going to have a little shopping cart icon there, so add an icon, right? Maybe this is going to be the search, right? So there's a search here. I know my face is in the way, all right? So maybe this is going to be a search. There you go. That's, oh, I'm on the other screen. There we go. Search. And maybe this is going to be social media. So Facebook, Twitter, X, Meta, whatever all these new names are. All right. You can put your social media icons and links and stuff up here, right? So that's sort of the idea, that you just set this up. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to have a search engine? Or maybe this is a drop-down list with choose your category. Like, ooh, we're doing Home Depot, so this is going to be a drop-down of kitchen supplies or outdoor yard works or lumber, right? Or deck design. Like, you can do whatever you want. If you're going to have a secondary menu, you can either have the menu across the top like this. Some places have it down the bottom. Some have both. All right. So you can see sort of how are you going to lay out the navigation of your site. Maybe your content is going to be in the middle. Maybe your home page has a great big picture on it. So this could be a picture like this. Okay. Maybe you've got some RSS news feeds here where you're saying the latest announcements and the latest occurrences. Then you have some external links and resources. You actually have a paragraph of content. Lorem ipsum is perfectly fine for representing a content. You haven't written the content. The words aren't here yet. So use lorem ipsum. It's all good. Okay. You can see here that if you get the if you put up the wireframe options, you'll see there's all kinds of mock-up buttons here. There's mock-up containers. You can say, okay, we're going to put a profile picture right there. There we go. We got a profile picture. Cool, right? Forms, right? All right, we're going to do, here's a tab form. We're going to go here, like, literally, there's the login page. That one's done. Right? Like, it doesn't take long to do these. I know you're going to have a lot of wireframes to do, but as you can see, I mean, they don't take very long. It's just, what are we going to have? If you have a drop down, okay, we're going to have a drop down here. Going to choose which country are you from, right? So you can do this. Like, even go here and, I don't know, can you type in this? Yeah, country. There you go. Okay. So you can just grab these and you can see, oh, I don't want to line, but anyways, so you can just drag and drop these, make your forms, put your buttons on there, those kind of things. So mock-up graphics. Say you're going to have some in the administration system. You could say, how profitable were we today compared to yesterday? Or what percentage of products we sell were chicken versus beef today? And maybe you're going to throw a pie chart on there. There you go, there's a pie chart, okay? Right? So you can come up with things like that. Markups, great, and then mock-ups. Like, there you go. We were talking about shopping cart icon. Let's grab this shopping cart icon. Let's throw that right there. Shrink it up a bit. There we go. It's not the greatest thing in the world, but it's a wireframe diagram. It's just to get an idea of what it's going to look like without actually spending a lot of time and work. Okay. All right, and obviously copyrights, those kind of things. There's some navigation here, so you can look at some different folding things, layering, different circles. So if it's a page, maybe you're going to show what's the loading symbol look like. Like if it's going to take 10 seconds to load, maybe we need a little animation so people can get hypnotized by it as you go, right? So what's that going to be, right? And then mock-up text, you can see there's some tables, there's different kinds of text boxes, there's sticky notes, and you can make it look pretty cool with just a few buttons and knobs and that. So it does not need to be sophisticated. As I may or may not have discussed with you in class, it is okay if you want to go beyond the wireframe and go more towards the prototyping. That would be, in the real world, that would be the next step, would be to start making a prototype, okay? I am not requiring a prototype in this course, but in the real world, you probably would do a little bit of a prototype. You'd get the graphics, the color schemas, you'd sort of lay out a real page, and then you'd have the client come in and say, okay, this is our first go at this, the first go, so lots of changes can still happen, but we wanted to get your initial reaction, your initial feedback to what we have here. Do you love it? Do you absolutely hate it? What do you see that you may want to change? And that way you can get somebody giving you good feedback visually, okay? However, as I said, we are not going to be doing prototyping in this course. So I am more than willing to say, if you want to extend the wireframes a little further forward to make more prototyping, where you're adding some colors, some logos, some theming and that, I'm okay with that. Just understand that will take a little bit more time. So again, you guys do you. If you guys want to do that, you're excited about that, go for it. I'm not going to stop you, okay? But what you see on the screen here from the wireframe perspective is all that is required, okay? Myself back up the corner. There we go. All right, so that's the wireframes. So as far as the progress report that is due, activity diagrams combined with user diagrams, one of each per person beyond the login screen. Put your names on what you're doing individually, okay? Then as a group, you're going to come up with all the pages you're going to have, and you're going to group those pages together in ones that have similar template layouts. And then for each different template layout, you're going to create a wireframe. At a minimum, any screen that has a form on it, like the login screen, the registration screen, the checkout screen, the update my profile screen, so anything that's a form that the user's going to type stuff in and have a submit button, I want a wireframe for those screens, because which fields are you including? As you can see, there is all kinds of stuff that you can use here with drop-down boxes, text boxes, sliders, all kinds of things here you can use to simulate a form, okay? Right up to basic check boxes and list boxes and radio buttons and color pickers and everything you want, okay? So in other words, I want the forms laid out, because knowing which fields are going to be on this thing and maybe putting the little red star beside ones that are required fields versus optional fields, those are business decisions that need to be made at the business decision level, not at the coding level. The coder just says, oh, okay, there's 5 fields, this is what they're called, these ones are required, boom, program it. Don't make decisions, just program it, okay? So that's sort of the idea. All right, so that's it for this progress report. Now, this progress report is worth 15% of your final mark, so put the time in about consistency, make it look good, put in the right, it's a formal document, so the right headers, the right page numbering, table contents, cover page, introduction, all those things, and going through the list. The only thing that it says on the document that you actually don't need to do is it says about your project management tool of choice, okay? I think that's in there from an older version of the course when I had the project management before the formal proposal, and therefore it's there. But I've since moved the project manager after the formal proposal, so you do not need to do anything to do with project management for project progress report 1. Okay, no project management. That's next week. Okay. All right, so hopefully that gives you a good summary and expectations for what you need to do for the first project submission. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to end this video, but I'm going to quickly create another video right away that I will upload with respect to next week's project to do with project management and how we're going to move forward with that. But I'm going to put that in a separate video so you guys don't need to fast forward through videos to get different parts. So as far as this video goes, that's what we've got. Progress report number 1. All right, it is due very soon, so just making sure that you pay attention to Blackboard with the exact due date, and then we can talk in class in our meetings. If you have any questions, you can bring them up in our next meeting, or you can contact me through MS Teams, and I will try and get back to you as quick as I can. All right, have a great week, and we will talk to you next time.